Welcome to the Out of Home Insider Show, where we are the loudest voice in out of home, bringing you tips, tricks, insider insights, and that is what today is all about, insider insights. I'm joined by Brian Rappaport, somebody that you've known around the industry for a while. He's set up his own shop, Quantum Media Group in New York, where he joins us live from today. Brian, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a nice way to end the week.
Definitely is. It's been a crazy week. The world's a changing place. We set this up about 2 weeks ago, and it was a different time then. We were going to do this in person in New York City, but it's a different time now. To understand where we are today, though, I think it's good to sort of reflect on where we came from. You're a staple in the out-of-home space, but tell us a little bit about your origin story. How did you get to where you are today with Quan?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I found this industry completely by accident. One of my best friends was working at Zenith Media back in 2007. I needed a full-time job after finishing up a quick little project job at the National Basketball Association. I applied for a junior print negotiator job at Zenith, ended up getting it, really fell in love with the agency space, worked in print for a while. And as Zenith grew and continued to win some really great clients heading into the 2010s, they kind of shifted me over to the out-of-home space, and that's really where I found a deep found passion for this media channel. I started working on Sonic Drive-Thru and then Delta and Verizon and some really incredible brands. And as Zenith kind of transformed as an agency, I started doing a little bit less out-of-home, and that's where I realized that I wanted to spend 100% of my time. And that fortunately coincided with the rise of Rapport, which is the out-of-home buying arm for Interpublic Group. And, like I say, right place, right time. Rapport needed an associate media director. It was the right move in my career for sort of a step up. And I stepped into Rapport just as they started handling the out-of-home buying for Media Hub, MullenLowe, and Hill Holliday. And it was amazing. I basically walked into an agency that was, I don't know, I try to find a good analogy, like a sports team that has like all of these young players, and then over the next 5 years, like wins, starts to win their division, wins championship. Like, my 4.5 years that I spent at Rapport were insane. We had phenomenal leadership. And on top of that, we, just were incredible in terms of morale in the office, winning new business, and just kind of, I think, setting the standard for what an agency should be. Yes, we were a holding company agency, but at the same time, we didn't operate like that. We kind of operated like a small shop, and we're so tight-knit and very familial in how we operated that it really lent itself to, kind of the overall gist of the office. Nobody left, nobody switched agencies. We had such a nice staying power there, and it was just probably the 4.5 best years of my entire career. What ultimately led me to Quan is that in 2015, about 4 or 5 months into my time at Rapport, I saw Casper all over the New York City subway system and really wondered, who was placing their out-of-home. At this point, when you're in the agency world for a while, what agency has HBO, what agency has Verizon, who has who. But I didn't know who had Casper, and found that they were basically buying their out-of-home directly. Reached out to the founder, Philip Krim, got a meeting within a week and sat in a room with him and basically said, this is what I do and this is why you should work with me. Let us help you scale, your out-of-home efforts. And literally the next day he emailed me and said, I really liked meeting with you. I want to work with you. What are the next steps? And that was such a good feeling. It was like, wow, I really like to win. And I just new business. I think I couldn't do that at Zenith because Zenith was a massive full service agency, whereas Rapport was just out of home. So it was a little bit easier to kind of bring clients in. It wasn't like a whole, agency new business pitch. So I brought in Casper, and after that, it just kind of, became a deep found love for working with brands one-on-one. I was overseeing some of the best agencies in the country from an out-of-home standpoint, as my quote-unquote day job. But after Casper came, Thinx, and then Third Love, and Daily Harvest, and Roman, and Quip, and Billy, and Luminary, and it just kept building where it got to the point where people were emailing me, hey, I got your name, from so-and-so. They said that you helped them with their out-of-home strategy. We're looking to launch out-of-home. We don't know what to do, or how to buy Chicago, or how to buy Boston. And 4.5 years in, I just kind of realized, like, hey, there is no shop out there that really caters to this growing sector. Like, there are some smaller shops that, like, yes, have some D2C clients, but there's not one real shop that's like, we know how to grow a D2C brand from a $50K budget to when they have a $1 million budget to when they have a $5 million budget. We know, there's no one shop that teaches them what markets are best for them based on what consumers are trying to reach, based on how their sales are performing. And that was my real, true, like, I guess, I don't know, deep-rooted passion in finding quant. I wanted to open up a shop where we could deliver a personalized approach to, buying and planning out of home for CMOs, directors of growth, directors of acquisition who had no real knowledge of the industry, and want to kind of learn more.
And do you find that there is that big education gap specifically on out of home? I know you take a really data-driven, that bespoke approach to out of home. Anyone can spend $5 million in a market.
Anyone.
To intelligently spend 50 grand because you know that the next 50 depends on this 50 making 250. To do that right, is it the education gap? Is it access to the education?
It is a lack of education. That is my biggest hurdle. That's the biggest challenge. It is. So out of home is only bulletins, right? Or can you buy the New York City? Can you buy the subway? Do you guys buy double-decker buses? Like, it's just questions like that when people don't understand how vast the out-of-home landscape is. And when I start to have conversations with clients and I explain to them, like, do you want to do a 3D projection on top of a painted wall in the middle of Williamsburg? And they're like, oh my God, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, we can do that. Out of home is so much more than a bulletin on the side of the road. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still going to be clients that just simply want to buy like that, and we're here for that at the same time. But for me, it's the most fun when I educate, a client on what really the out-of-home landscape is, and then they start doing some of the fun stuff in it.
Because that's really what advertising is, right? It's equal parts science and equal parts art, and it's being able to do a 3D projection on a painted surface in Williamsburg, and they go, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. Well, right. I didn't know that you could do this with a painting.
Totally.
Do you look at the format as sort of your canvas in how you approach a client's campaign?
I'm a creative person. That's just who I am. I've always been that way. I really think outside the box. I'm wild and I'm wacky. And, for me, like, it's never been our job or, where I've been, whether it's Zenith Rapport, Quant, like, to come up with creative concepts for clients. But when clients let you do that, that's where you really, get to shine and show that you're a true partner. And I think for me, that really was in the forefront at Rapport, because a lot of the agencies that we worked with there were true partners to us and like looked to us to be the out-of-home expert. Like they were like, what can we do in this market for this client? And, we would sit at Rapport, our whole office, regardless of what account we worked on, and brainstorm to try and come up with some really amazing first to market concepts. And, I think some of the coolest stuff that's been done in the last 5 years in out-of-home have come out of Rapport. And that's not me being biased because that's where I worked. I mean, we don't have enough time, but if you did your Googling and you did your research, the experiential and non-traditional world of out-of-home has heavily been penetrated by Rapport over the last 5 years. And that's kind of, where the most fun in working this industry sort of stems from.
Really. Anytime that I'd say maybe 1 in 3 out of the activations that you see get picked up and people talking about has Rapport tied to it in some form or fashion. And you described it, right? You described a culture where it fostered that and really promoted that, and you were exchanging ideas across accounts. And how much of a miss do you feel like that's commonplace in the out-of-home agency world? Do you think that that's maybe one of the biggest opportunities for brands to get better?
I think brainstorming and utilizing, your coworkers and your peers is the best way to really help, your client. And unfortunately, as an agency grows and gets bigger, there's going to be less than that. But I mean, I was working at an agency with 8 to 10 people, and, it was very easy for everyone to turn their chairs around and devote 20 minutes to kind of brainstorming for a given client. I think that, like, everyone brings their own ideas and experience to the table. And I think every agency that's out there, has such good talent and good experience that, like, I think that's a big miss for some people is don't be afraid to talk to your coworker and ask them, how would you approach this? That coworker may be working on a completely different piece of business, but if they're a true peer, they're going to give you the time of day and try and help you, with what you're looking to accomplish for your client.
And that could really bring so much benefit to it. I see the world through one lens and you see it through a different lens. And maybe there's something that I'm doing, something that I love that you do is using the capabilities behind digital, and specifically the weather trigger that you're doing with Roman, or was it Roman Rowe? So, we use, in fact, we just used a dynamic script to help take workload off of the creative team. I had a client wanted to do a bunch of thank yous in a bunch of different formats on digital. I said, rather than you do 4 designs for 46 different creatives, that's just going to, why don't we just use a dynamic script on digital and be done with it. And the creative department was over the moon. So, you're using the dynamic. What percentage do you see of campaigns? And there's probably no correct number, but is that an opportunity for brands to have more fun with the format?
Yeah.
We're going to do digital.
I think that brands need to start to utilize. Look, I think the digital out of home is such an important part of our industry, and obviously that's leading to the growth of out of home year over year. But I think that, like, when you were talking about a top 5 DMA that really has multiple digital formats, like, a brand should really be thinking, through the lens of what can I do that is going to make this campaign, further amplified. Look, if you're running digital billboards in Charlotte, there's only so much you can do there, and it's no offense. I mean, you could do day parts and weather triggers, and I get it. But if you're in a market like in New York or even a Boston now, or a Chicago, like, you can really be creative with what you're looking to accomplish through digital out of home.
And you're talking really about transcending just what we think about as digital billboards on the side of the road. It's screens at malls. It's the back of a taxi. It's all of these different places that you can be. Is that what you're alluding to?
Definitely. I mean, I think, I think it's kind of exciting every time there's a new digital format and out of home introduced. It's kind of like, what can I use this for? I think, Play Octopus is a good example. They came into the space and there are these fun screens in the back of rideshare vehicles that offer trivia and, that offer all of these other different platforms. And, like, as they're scaling, at first when I met with the guys, I didn't really see a lot of them. But now, like, I got into a car in Florida last week and I have a 30-minute ride to West Palm Beach and I'm literally playing trivia and I'm having so much fun. But at the same time, the attribution side of what they offer up is pretty amazing, and they're able to sort of measure a one-to-one connection. And, I think that, like, the more out of home or digital out of home assets, come out, there's going to be that component of, attribution and measurement that's going to, make it truly a better, plus for the industry and for agencies and clients.
And where does data and audience insight, where does that come into your process? Is it on the planning side? Is it on the measurement side, on the back end? Is it all the way through?
It's usually on the planning side. I mean, in the beginning, the way that I personally plan, and I think that no matter how big Quan gets, however many years down the road, I'm always going to be involved in building plans. I just love it. I don't care. It's one of my favorite things to do. I like to think audience first when I'm building out a plan. Like, where is this target audience, for this brand? Which is why it's such a plus when a brand takes the time to give you a proper brief. Like, here's the core audience. Here are their habits, their psychographic traits, where they may be during the day, what they do for hobbies. Because, with what we have now on the audience measurement side, or at least the audience analytical side, there's a real firm way to plan out of home so strategically that you are actually in front of the audience that a brand is trying to reach. And, I am the biggest lover of brand awareness campaigns, because if someone's going to give me $1 million and say, we're looking to do brand awareness in New York City, I'm going to have a blast. There's so much you can do. But unfortunately, that's not happening all the time. And, 75% of the time, there are KPIs tied to an out-of-home plan. There, you need to hit a certain CAC if you're a D2C client. And that's where thinking audience first sort of comes into play on the plan.
I'm so glad that you touched on a customer acquisition cost, because that, especially now in a climate where efficiency is so paramount, if I can acquire customers for less than you, then I can outspend you and I can put you out. What should a brand be looking at right now, considering where we are today in 2020? Is now a time to pull back? Is now a time to double down? Is now a time just to be smarter?
I think it's just a time to be smarter. Like, let's put, what's going on in the world right now aside, because God willing, it blows over in 4 to 6 weeks. And, like, now it's just a time to be smarter with your spend. Like, you don't need to spend $1 million in out of home to be successful in a top 5 DMA, but, like, you can't really get away with it with just 25K. Having said that, like, that's our, one of our expertise, I guess you could say. Like, I could find a way to utilize 25K in a given market, and I'll do my best to make sure it's spent the most strategically. But, like, if you have 200K and you're looking to spend it in New York, we could be super smart, super effective, and really, like, help you bring in the consumers you're looking to reach.
So, right. So that matters. So for anybody listening to this, sometimes it's the fear of the unknown. I don't have the budget. I can't even play in that arena. But what you're saying is that really that we can work with different budget types, still put together a campaign that works, that's based on real data and audience insight. So would you say Do you, if somebody has a budget that's maybe less than that 25,000, do you start to then look at secondary markets, or do you say come back when you have more? Do you try to do?
It's a conversation. It's really a conversation, and I pride myself and what we do over here on. I will tell a client if they should bank those dollars rather than spend them in out of home and then not see a result. I think it's important, and that's what's ultimately going to build client trust, because maybe right now they just don't have it. They don't have the money to spend it out of home, and they're not going to see a result. But in 6 months, when they're a unicorn or whatever the case is, they're going to come back and be like, you know what, we just got another round of funding, and marketing is huge for us, and we have a good 350 to 400 to spend it out of home, and we're ready to go big now. I think what makes us different is that I'm sorry, people could deny it, but you can't go to a large agency as a new client and ask, tell them that you want to spend 50K. They're either going to turn you away, or they're going to tell you that you can't spend it. I think that my competitors and myself in this space, that's kind of what makes us stand out a little bit. Maybe even some of the other competitors out there will not bother with that. I will work with any budget. I just want to try and find a way to make it work best for a client. And if it can't, then I'll just tell them.
And that's something important. We talked about a little bit before, the show here, that we live in a world of abundance, right? There's enough for all of us to be successful. So there's no reason to turn somebody away, maybe just because of budget, but being able to make a good recommendation that says, hey, Brian, you know what? I really want to work with you, but I couldn't do the best job for you right now. So why don't you wait? And then when you do come back, you've got a trusted partner, because these relationships are going to grow from 50,000 to 5 million. There's a lot. This is a long road, and it can be tempting to take that first dollar.
You have to play the long game, because there's so many clients that I've worked with where literally I've put together 5 to 10 different approaches, and I keep thinking they're going to buy, and they're like, now's not the right time, or we're not ready, and they disappear, and I forget about them. And all of a sudden, 6 months later, they're back, and they're like, we want to see one other approach, and then they sign off on the buy, and they're like, now's the right time for us. And that's why, it's all about client service. It's such a cliche thing, but it really is about client service.
It's so important. I just listened to a book called A Spy's Guide to Strategy. It was written by this former CIA case officer, and he talks a lot about starting with the other person's end game. So he was talking about working intelligence assets, but it's really so much of what we do, right? What's your end game, right? Your end game might be different than mine, and it might be different than client A, and it's different than client B. And if we can keep in scope what somebody's end game is, what is the thing they're trying to accomplish right now, and how we fit into that? Because I feel like so often we're thinking, I got to sell space right now. I need a campaign right now. But that might not be your end game. Maybe it's just getting that introductory information, or exploring what out of home looks like. So I really appreciate that you take that approach. On the attribution side, as we start, there's so much conversation about attribution right now. What do you think? What's the right way to approach attribution for out of home?
I think it's sitting with the client and saying, what do you want to get out of this campaign? Are you looking to measure drive to site? Are you looking to measure foot traffic into a brick and mortar location? Are you looking for simply awareness? Like, who knew about my brand before this out-of-home campaign? Now who knows about it after? And how do they know about it? I think there are enough solves now on the attribution side and out-of-home, and enough really good partners where you have to have the conversation. Don't just go to the table and say, oh, we could retarget, or we could geofence. It's really asking the client, what are you looking to get out of this campaign? And if it's, simply awareness, then so be it.
How do you approach measuring awareness? And hey, Brian, I want to do an awareness campaign, and let's measure awareness. How are you going to approach that task?
It's usually with a test and control market. Based on if where you're launching out of home. But we just did a big out of home buy for Banza, which is a chickpea pasta. They've never done out of home, and it happens to be very good.
I love Banza pasta.
Up in Boston, and basically did a station dom in their largest in Back Bay, and took over a bunch of brand trans and ran live boards throughout the whole system. And we used the test and control market, obviously Boston, and then Philadelphia, where there was no out of home. We did a pre and post awareness study through Mira. And without getting into specifics, basically, because of out of home, essentially, or direct correlation, the awareness level for Banza spiked as soon as we were finished with our plan, as opposed to 2 weeks before we launched our plan. And there's so much more into the post awareness research, but that's that was a simple awareness study, and it was kind of awesome to see because, you know, Outfront was a great partner. We had a really strong plan. I just knew from the beginning, sometimes, you know, like you're not going to be Apple or Facebook or Spotify, but like, you know, when an out-of-home plan is going to work. Like you just know when people are going to understand and know about a brand after you run an out-of-home campaign. And I just knew before Bonds, like anyone that's up in Boston is going to know about this brand by the time this is done if they didn't know about it. And you know, now at least we have the actual results to kind of prove that.
And now you can scale off that, right? Now I've got a proven approach.
Right.
I know it works. And now where else do you want to do it?
Right. Let's see where, you know, what maybe didn't work or what wasn't the most effective tactic, and like, you know, find markets that are and that's kind of how I've planned for D2C brands, you know, for the last 5 years. It's like, you know, for Casper is after they were done with New York, which they did by themselves. I came in basically when they were done with New York. It was what markets are very similar to New York, where we've seen success, where we can kind of mirror what we've done from an out-of-home standpoint and hopefully see success, you know, in that other market. And it started for them in San Francisco. And we kind of did an identical approach to New York, and they saw results. But it was kind of funny because then after that, we went to Chicago, and we kind of took a different approach in Chicago and kind of stayed away from transit and did, I don't know, went a little bit different than both Chicago and New York, and they didn't see real lift in Chicago.
Really? So different approach in Chicago.
It was years ago, and it was like, yeah, it was, you know, it's a much longer story, and out of fairness to, you know, to Casper, I'm not going to jump into it, but like, you know, we took a different approach in Chicago than New York and San Fran were definitely very heavy transit markets. And also those markets are identical. And Chicago is a pretty similar market also. And yeah, we took a different approach and they didn't really see results, whereas they did in San Fran and New York. And funny enough, Boston later that year we went to, same approach as New York and San Fran, and Boston, they saw such nice results that they increased their out-of-home spend there. And they were basically, I think at the time, maybe the only channel running, or maybe it was in collaboration with direct mail. It was a while ago, but it's kind of interesting. And I mean, I think that's, you know, once you've conquered the top 3 or 4 markets that you've seen success in, then you can kind of start playing in those secondary markets where like you could shift the approach and kind of play around and see, you know, what works in terms of awareness versus what doesn't.
I think it's really important what you just touched on there was not being afraid to try something and fail, because that's what we do, right? We're always testing creative formats, measurement. We're always testing these things because the world's constantly evolving and how we can measure these types of things. And one thing that you might have never tried before, you try and it turns out to be the most effective thing. Do you feel, do you approach campaigns with that in mind from an A/B test, or we're going to test markets against markets? How do you?
I think it's markets against markets. I really hope that like a client that didn't see success in their first ever out-of-home campaign doesn't get turned off to out-of-home. I mean,
but it happens. It happens so frequently.
It happens, and in complete fairness, because, you know, while I love to pride, you know, what I do and what Quan does, and, you know, on successful campaigns, like we worked with a client a few months ago that did their first, you know, out-of-home campaign in Atlanta. They didn't have a massive budget, and Atlanta's a tough market to like penetrate unless you have a really high budget, because it's heavily driving. And even as some of the new large format, you know, out of home, you know, rolls out in downtown and by 5 points, it's still a tough market. The mass transit system isn't really used that much. And, you know, the client spent somewhere in the 50 to 75K range on, you know, we really tried to get refined. We use zip code data, so on and so forth, but they didn't really see much results as a result of the out of home campaign. And I don't know, that first of all, that always sucks, because I'm like, I feel like I failed at my job. But at the same time, it's like, all right, well, at the same time, you spent 50K, you didn't spend 500. Let's just sit together and figure out maybe what other markets are in contention moving forward. And let's change things up for the next go around. Because if you're going to get turned off because you didn't see results from your first ever out of home campaign and be afraid, then like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you can't, it's more of like a life lesson. Like, you can't get upset when you fail the first time. You know, you try again. Scared money don't make money. That's right. It's like doubling down in blackjack, you know?
That's it. Play the hot hand.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the conversation that I'm having with advertisers right now is that double down conversation. It's an opportunity to own more attention for arguably less money, right? We know that money is shifting in terms of areas of focus. So I think that's a great point that you bring out.
Totally, yeah.
So, Brian, you're based in New York, but you've got campaigns all over the country. Is there anywhere that you don't work? Are you mostly U.S.
Oh,
focused?
we are fully national in that, North America, that includes Canada. I've done buying and planning in Toronto and Vancouver. We have international capabilities. So, whether it's the UK or Spain, so on and so forth. But I think what really, what we pride ourselves on is market expertise, especially in North America. Like, when a client comes to us and they're looking to do something in Miami, like, we know where they should be, what units are great, what partners in the sales side are the strongest there. And we try and help guide them. And like, we want to host market rides and we want to educate clients on market nuances. And I think it's really important. And like, look, I don't want to go ahead and speak ill of competitors in this space who may have more automated approaches to buying and planning out of home, because I think that there's a niche that needs to be filled all over the place. But I am a firm believer in that cannot be the end all be all for your out of home buying and planning needs. That personalization and that experience and understanding the space is so important for a client that I just personally don't feel the threat of, full automation. And maybe to a degree, yes, and I get it, and it definitely helps. But, the best comparison for me is, and I've kind of gone off on a tangent, is, I do my taxes through a CPA, and there's TurboTax out there, and I can go ahead and do it. But what's to say that in 2 years I get an email from the IRS or a letter from the IRS saying that I owe an additional $5,000 because I accidentally forgot to file something, or something was incorrect. And I know with the CPA it's going to be perfect, and they maybe get paid a little bit, of a commission or whatever it is, but they've earned it because they've helped me accomplish what I'm looking to accomplish. So.
And you see that shift happening, not just in our space, but sort of in the world in general. I want some human interaction. Yeah, it's great that I can buy things with one click on Amazon, but I prefer to have a conversation with Brian here than maybe just going to an automated platform looking at some photo sheets and all right.
Totally. And people are going to claim turnaround time and say, oh, but I could do this in get it real live inventory. It's all of that is like, look, I hate to promote myself like this, but like, if you really need something in 24 hours, like, we'll make it happen. We're good. It's turnaround time and deliverables are never going to be compromised. At least on our end, that's kind of been number one for me. Client service, obviously number one, but like meeting deadlines and coming in before them has always been just how I've operated since I've been at Zenith. So, that's kind of what I instill on people that I work with and how we're going to kind of build this thing.
It reminds me of my high school days, souping up cars and stuff. We had a saying, cheap, reliable, fast, pick two. If you want it fast and cheap, it's not going to be reliable. Reliable and fast isn't going to be cheap. And it's really the same with picking a partner for your advertising. Hey, I'd rather take the time and have a bespoke plan that I know is going to be executed seamlessly at every level than just going quick and turning something around.
Yeah, totally.
I think that there's a lot of value to that. Brian, how can people get in touch with you? We've got listeners all over the world. I think we're up to 11 countries as far away as the Philippines. Wow. So that's why I asked the question of where your footprint is. But what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I don't want to jinx myself and open up Pandora's box, but I'm known for responding to emails within anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes after getting them, regardless of the day of the week or time of the day, unless I'm really out of pocket. So Brian at quanmediagroup.com is fine. I won't give you our generic info at Quan Media Group. Feel free to email me. I'm always open to helping people out, having a discussion about our industry. I love talking about out-of-home advice. Look, obviously, if you're a potential client, I love that. Again, it doesn't matter what budget you have, but whether you're looking to break into the industry, whether you're looking for agency advice, feel free to reach out. And I guess the one thing that I'll say is that I really do love doing what I do, and I think most of all, it's because of the industry that we're in and the camaraderie. And I think it's kind of unique that it's a really tight-knit niche part of media, and everyone seems to get along and have friends all over the place, competing agencies on the sales side. And I think, that kind of has to stay that way because it's important, to kind of keep that human element of camaraderie and getting along and all that stuff.
I absolutely agree. I just jumped on Jason Hansen's little lunch meeting from Rapify on Zoom, and we talked for 20, 25 minutes just about life, about what's going on. And you and I were able to connect here today. It really is a great community. It's a great industry to be a part of. for prospective clients, one thing that I personally love about Brian's approach is the planning side and putting together a bespoke plan, coming from the digital or the online marketing space and understanding how to put together an audience. And then ultimately, who do I want to talk to? Where do I want to talk to them? And how are we going to execute all this? I love the approach that you deploy from a planning standpoint. So from a little fanboy here, I appreciate you leading the charge on that, because there's so much opportunity to do such a better job for clients and out of home to prevent those bad first experiences that make it twice as hard to get somebody to come back and try it again. So doing it right the first time is good for the industry. It's good for everybody. Everybody benefits. So Brian, we'll make sure to include your email in the show notes below. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I hope that has for you as well.
Definitely it has. Thanks for the time. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and I appreciate it.
You do the same, and we'll talk to you soon. Everybody, thanks for listening. This has been the Out of Home Insider Show, and we'll talk to you guys next time.